Welcome back to Rome Boys. On this episode, we welcome author Patrick Novecosky. Woo!
How's it going, Patrick?
Great to be with you guys. Looking forward to this for a long time.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, thanks so much for being on. We appreciate it.
You bet. Novecosky. That's just fun to say.
We might say it 10 or 12 times.
You know, people butcher my last name all the time so I can imagine how much your last name gets butchered. You know.
Yeah, it happens.
I had a guy one time, a professor in college, butcher my name so bad I didn't even know he was talking to me.
Just call me Joe.
Yeah. He said, Joe, I don't even know how he pronounced it. And I just started looking around. I was like, I think that was me. I'm not real sure. But anyway. So a little bit about Patrick. Patrick is one of America's most accomplished Catholic communicators. He's the author of 100 Ways John Paul II Changed the World, and has won more than 24 awards from the Catholic Press Association. He's the managing partner of Nova Media, a public relations firm specializing in the Catholic space. He previously served as Legatus magazine's editor-in-chief for 12 years. He's traveled to 26 countries, met St. John Paul II 5 times, and made Pope Francis laugh out loud. But most importantly, he is the husband and father of 5 beautiful children. Welcome, Patrick Novecosky.
Thank you, gents. I love it when people read my bio because it's so beautiful, and I wrote it myself. So.
I like it. Well, the first question I have for you is, what was the joke that you told Pope Francis that made him laugh out loud?
Okay. Well, digging a little bit further into my extended bio, I'm also a marathon runner.
Oh.
So I was in Rome for with a group of folks that were meeting Pope Francis, and I just happened to also find out that the Rome Marathon was that same weekend. So what I said to the Pope was, "Holy Father." First of all, I'm holding his hand, right, like I did my own dad, and I said, "Holy Father, on Sunday I'm running the Rome Marathon." And I waited a beat because his English isn't so good. And then when I could tell by looking in his eyes that he understood what I said, then I said, "Please pray for me." And because, he's always doing that too, like, pray for me, right? So Cardinal Wuerl, who introduced us, he laughed out loud. And then the Pope laughed out loud. And then Pope Francis says, I do.
Excellent.
Awesome. Did you win the race?
And he did. Well, I didn't win the race, but I ran a personal best.
So, well, there you go.
Good. Go Pope Francis is first.
Yeah, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Cool.
And you met John Paul II a bunch of times. Tell us about that, those experiences.
Yeah, well, I was a young reporter for the Marian Fathers, the Marians of the Immaculate Conception. They have a magazine called The Marian Helper. Goes out to about 250,000 people. And this is back in 1996. I won a contest, actually. I won a raffle, and the grand prize, which I won, was a trip for 2 to Cancun.
Sweet.
And how does that lead to John Paul II? Well, I called the travel agent and I said, I don't want to go sit on a beach, guys. I want to go to Rome.
Why not?
And they said, okay. And then my boss found out about it, and he said, well, since you're going to Rome, I was single at the time. He said, you can stay at our monastery there. And by the way, would you like to meet the Pope?
Of course.
And this is the mic drop moment. Yeah, sure. Okay. What do you got in mind? So they put me on this list, and I prayed like heck to Saint Therese because I read her biography, read Story of the Soul, and she was a 16-year-old girl. She went to Rome with her dad, and she got in front of the Pope, and she said, "I want to enter the Carmel." And I thought, well, she's a good one to ask, right? Because I'm in Rome. I'm on a list. I'm waiting to meet the Pope. So I asked for her intercession. And we've been in Rome. It was the end of September. Been in Rome a few days, and we're waiting every day. So how it worked was that if you were a priest or a bishop and you wanted to celebrate the Mass, I think it was just for bishops, actually. You wanted to celebrate the Mass with John Paul's private Mass, 7:30 in his private chapel, papal apartments. You call ahead, you get your name, and you show up, and you can celebrate with the Pope. If there were seats left over, the chapel holds about 30 people, and you were a layperson, and you were on the list, the VIP list, I guess, they'll call you the night before. So every night, my brother was with me. We went back to the monastery, and we asked very urgently, so did they call? And every night it was like, no call. Well, it was the last day of September, 1997. And my brother and I were out. We went to St. John Lateran, and we saw these pictures of St. Therese everywhere. And it was all in Italian at that point. I couldn't read any Italian. And their TV cameras, so we knew it was probably going to be a Mass there that night. And I remembered, send up a little prayer, St. Therese, intercede for us. We went back to the monastery, and they came looking for us. They said, they called, you're going to see the Holy Father tomorrow. Tomorrow happened to be October 1st, 1997, which happened to be our feast day.
Yes.
So we were all excited, and it went really well. But the rest of the story is that the last day of September, 1897, was the day that she died.
Oh my
goodness. So the prayer was answered on the centenary of her death.
Wow.
Oof. Right? There are, and we met him on her feast day. There are no coincidences.
Sure, that's a God incident.
So
it gave me chill bumps.
So I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for that moment where I take my last breath and I go through my purgatory and then I go through the gates and she's standing there going, yes. You're that guy. You're that guy. What they having? You're that guy.
You're that marathon
runner. Yep. You're that guy.
Well, that's proof positive that we need to ask St. Therese for her intercession. We gotta look her up.
Absolutely. So she probably got, Jesus probably said to herself, like, once every 100 years, I'll give you a special thing, right? And she's like, this guy keeps asking me to see the Pope. So how about you take care of him right now?
Yeah, like the story of the persistent widow, right? Just keep asking, keep on it.
Exactly. So in addition to being a writer for the Marian Helper magazine, I was also the webmaster of Marian.org. And the Marians were, at that point, she was Blessed Faustina. We were talking about Divine Mercy and Divas in Misericordia, the Pope's great what am I looking for? Encyclical on Divine Mercy that he wrote in 1981. So when I got to meet John Paul, what I had for him was, and I can send you the picture of me standing beside him, holding pages from Marian.org about Divine Mercy and St. Faustina and his encyclical. And so I had 60 seconds standing there beside the Vicar of Christ, telling him about my work. He said, thank you. He pressed a rosary in my hand and he moved to the next person. It was incredible because I'm born and raised in Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm just a farm kid from Saskatchewan. I'm standing beside the most consequential Pope of the last 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And he's listening to me. Holy cow. Yeah. I mean, I was blown away. But this is the cool thing. We had the Mass. The Mass was beautiful. And then we moved into an adjoining room and we waited for him to unvest and come through the doors. And I was a little nervous. I was thinking about what I'm going to say and all of that. But when the doors opened and he walked through, all that anxiety was gone. Wow. It was just gone. It was so easy to talk to him. I was not tongue-tied. It was amazing. And I attribute that just to the grace of his holiness, you know. And I'm sure that people felt that when they met Jesus. Maybe they couldn't articulate it that way, but you come into the presence of someone who's holy And if your soul is disposed to recognize that, you'll recognize it. And I sure did.
Did you know he was a saint at that time? When I was at World Youth Day in Toronto and he flew over in the plane, I'm like, interiorly, I was like, that's a saint. That's the holiest person you will ever see in your life. I'm like, whoa, where did that just come from?
I know. Yeah. I don't think I would have at that point in my life articulated it that way, but I recognized that this man was incredibly holy. I knew enough about him at that point to know. Yeah. I mean, and at the point where he died, and they're going Santo Subito in St. Peter's Square, I'm like, yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yes,
this guy was. He was one of a kind. He was like, God gives us one of these every 500 years.
Wow.
And a lot of people get down on Pope Francis for a lot of things, and we don't need to go into that. But I think we've been very spoiled in the last 100 years to have really extraordinary men as Pope. Really extraordinary, from Leo the 13th all the way down to Pope Benedict. And Francis is just ordinary. He's an ordinary Pope. He's an average Pope. And our standards are very high, which they should be.
Yeah.
No question. But I chalk it up to he's just an average Pope, you know. And
doing the best he can. It's like Joseph and Mary and Jesus, just trying to hang in there. Joseph is,
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, that's a tough road, being Saint Joseph, who is, one of the holiest saints on the planet, right, ever to exist. But the competition is right there, and not competition, but the complementarity of the woman. You can't keep up with that.
Yeah.
So set pretty high.
Anyway, I met John Paul II for the first time in 1997. The Marians actually had a commission from John Paul II to lead the re-evangelization of Eastern Europe. They had priests behind the Iron Curtain throughout the communist era. And my job after meeting him was to go into Eastern Europe as a reporter and gather stories of the Marians, their work, their needs, and come back and write that for Marian Helper magazine, which I did, and it was entirely successful. They raised hundreds of thousands of dollars on my stories. So they were thinking, this kid's got something. So they sent me back to Rome in '98. I met the Pope again. I started to feel like the Catholic Forrest Gump. I got to meet the Pope again. And then back into Eastern Europe, writing more stories. '99, the same thing. 2000, same thing. And then I met my wife. So I went to Rome each of these years, 97, 98, 99, 2000. And I had the sense during the Great Jubilee that I would meet her. I didn't know how or when, but literally 20 years ago this month, I met her. And it was the tail end of the Great Jubilee, which I think went to about January 21st, 2001. And I met her on Ave Maria Singles. And we started corresponding. And by April of 2001, I proposed May 4th of 2001. So it was pretty quick whirlwind romance. And I remember meeting her for the first time in person. I went back to my boss and I said, I think I met the person I'm going to marry. And that means that either I'm going to be leaving or she's going to be leaving. But I had a sense it was going to be me. So I worked for the Marians until the summer of '01. And then from there, oh, by the way, the last time I met John Paul II was the Sposi Novelli blessing 11 days after we got married in 2002. So we went to Rome for our honeymoon, started our honeymoon in Rome, and knelt in front of a saint, and he blessed us and sent us on our way to change the world.
Awesome.
And it's been an amazing ride. So that's my JP2 experiences. Three of those 5 meetings were in private audiences, and 2 of them were in the square. One in the square being the Sposi Novelli blessing. So it's just a great honor and a great blessing. One of the fruits of my book, which I pondered for a long time, why did God allow me this great grace to meet this man 5 times? And I think my book is kind of, it grew out of that. Because I've been giving a talk about John Paul and how I met him and his legacy for about 10 years. And then I realized about a year ago, just over a year ago, that his 100th birthday was coming up in May of 2020. So I had some time. I wanted to write a book. I always wanted to write a book since I was in high school, and this book just it flowed. I wrote this in 3 months, which is extraordinarily quick. But I wanted to capture his legacy especially for people who didn't grow up under his pontificate. A lot of the kids graduating from high school now, even college graduates. I mean, you might be 22 years old, but you were 7 when he died. And what do you remember from being 7, especially of the church and the Pope? Nothing. So this book just kind of grabs 100 of the best things he did, his greatest accomplishments. But I wanted to capture his legacy in a unique way. I mean, there are a lot of biographies of John Paul II, so many books about him, what he accomplished, everything from ending the communism in Eastern Europe to the new evangelization and World Youth Day, just so many things that he did. But I wanted to capture this particularly for young people who were either very young or not yet born when he died 15 years ago, almost 16 years ago now. Because we don't talk about John Paul II nearly enough. His legacy is incredible. It's deep. It's profound. It literally is world-changing. And so I wrote the book for them so that they could understand the depth and breadth of his influence. Certainly one of the most consequential men of the 20th century. And the most consequential pope, I think, of the last 1,000 years. But I also wrote it for people that are like you and me, who grew up with him. I was, goodness, what was I? I was 10 when he was elected. And I missed so much. I mean, I paid attention to the news from the time I was a late teen. And I watched This World Travels, and I saw what happened. I knew that he influenced the end of the Cold War, but I missed a lot. So Paul Kengor, who wrote A Pope and a President, the Ronald Reagan, John Paul II story, he wrote my foreword. He read my book and he said there were things in this book that he didn't even know.
Right.
He had written 2 books about John Paul, given dozens of lectures, and I surprised him. So I think I accomplished something really cool here in making it accessible, easy to read, and really jam-packed with information and inspiration that will make just jaw-dropping stuff. I was surprised at how much I learned.
And and like you said, there's a variety of topics. So you move from one thing and you take a couple of minutes, and you move to the next, and it's just fun. It's just lighthearted. I almost read it. I think it was in a couple of days. So it was, but you can absorb a lot, and there's a lot of depth there too, but in a fun way, in a unique style, and not overbearing, like, okay, I can get, this is good. Yeah. And of course he's awesome, so it's even easier.
That makes it a whole lot easier. So in your opinion, do you think John Paul II will be a doctor of the church someday?
And a great too, as well.
I certainly hope so. This is one of the things I wrote in the afterward, that I think in my lifetime that he will be declared a doctor of the church. We might have to wait till 10, 15, 20 years to have that happen. And that's a proclamation by the Holy Father. The Pope decides who is a doctor of the church based on certain criteria, but certainly the scope of his writing. I mean, doctor just simply means teacher, right? A great teacher, an extraordinary teacher of the faith. I really expect that St. Faustina, because of her diary, will be proclaimed a doctor of the church, even in my lifetime. But John Paul the Great, absolutely. So the great, there's Pope Leo the Great, and help me out, there's one more.
Oh gosh, what was the other one?
Who's the other?
Gregory?
Yeah.
Gregory the Great. Yeah.
Gregory the Great, yes. I think John Paul will be proclaimed the third great pope, and how that happens is merely by public acclamation. Like in the square after he died, it was Santo Subito, declare him a saint now. And that's how saints used to be declared in the early church. It was by popular acclamation, that the people, the vox populi, the voice of the people saying, yes, he is a saint. So I really believe that, and that's happening. There are schools named John Paul the Great. There's a university in California named John Paul the Great. I think the ball is rolling in that direction. And I think it'll only take a couple of decades, and the church will go, yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Well, we already know it, but
We all
I kind of feel that
Yeah.
way.
just like we knew he was a saint before they said it, but got to make it official. The church takes the time. You got to scrutinize all that stuff. So
yeah.
I've always heard about, he went to
Absolutely.
confession often, but did he go daily, weekly? I've heard all different answers. So do you have the official on that?
I'm not an authority on those particulars, but what I heard was that he went every week.
Okay. Yeah. That's not bad. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I kind of wonders, like,
Definitely
what
admirable.
confess?
Yeah. I
I mean,
mean,
what would he confess? I mean, I've heard sometimes the priest say that, hearing a nun's confession is like being stoned to death with marshmallows. So I can imagine what Pope John Paul II had to say.
Well, when you're great, it's hard to be humble, and pride is the sin that led to the great fall. I mean, when we accomplish a lot, when God gives us so many gifts and so many graces, it's tough to retain the humility. And I'm only speculating here. I don't know how he was, in the confessional, but. That's the only thing I could speculate about.
Right.
He had impeccable character. And you guys heard the controversy about him that he allowed so many things to go on in the church that men like McCarrick and Maciel deceived him, and he allowed them to continue in the ministry even though there were red flags. But there's just one thing to remember is a couple of things. John Paul abhorred gossip. When he would just cut people off, and gossip was just he didn't like it, wouldn't listen to it. And the other thing is that he took men at their word. When someone looked him in the eye, shook his hand, told him that this is the truth, even though he didn't know at the time that they were lying to him, and he didn't know it. He was deceived. So, the story with McCarrick is that there was this great dossier on his misdeeds, which we don't need to get into. And McCarrick wrote John Paul a handwritten letter saying it was all lies. John Paul believed him because he grew up under the Soviet communism in Poland, and he saw what they did to priests. Lies were abundant on priests to bring them down, to bring down the church. They hated the church. They hated everything about the church, about faith. And so he'd seen it all before. And he took men at their word. Maciel, the same thing. He lied to John Paul's face. And he was a very convincing, both these men, very convincing liars. They deceived thousands and thousands of people. So why would we expect that he wouldn't be able to deceive the Pope too?
Right.
Especially when it's somebody like John Paul II who takes everybody for their word and expects the best out of everyone.
And the thing that people misunderstand about being a saint is just because you're a saint, just because you're holy, even while you're living, doesn't mean you can't be deceived. Doesn't mean you can't be wrong.
Right.
It just means that your heart is all in for God and for the salvation of souls, and that's what you live for. I mean, if that's who you are, then you're a saint, right? 100% of your passion is for saving souls and for living for Christ and being another Christ to the world and bringing him to the world and teaching the faith. And that's John Paul II. Doesn't mean he didn't make mistakes or commit sins or get deceived. He didn't have a spider sense that was like, oh, this guy's lying to me.
Yeah, right.
He didn't have that.
Yeah.
Although I always said it would be really cool if these two men, Maciel and McCarrick, went to confession to Padre Pio. That would be cool.
There we go. Then he would.
That would be cool.
They might not have made it out of the confession.
They might not have made it in the confession.
Yeah. To go.
But Pio had that gift of being able to read souls. He knew when people were lying to him. He kicked people out of the confessional. He's like, don't you dare come back here until you're ready to confess all of your sins.
Yeah.
And people would forget their sins. He'd remind them of what their sins were. I mean, where does that is an extraordinary gift.
Yes.
So and a great grace for sinners, right? I mean, you're being called to the carpet for things that this priest could never know that, but he knows it and he's telling me. It's like that should put the fear of God in you pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what role, what role did JP2 play in encouraging and fostering, evangelization?
Wow. Well, for those of you who've read my book, the new evangelization is number one, and it's for this simple reason: the church exists to evangelize. The first thing that Jesus said in his public ministry was, "Come and see." He invited his apostles to come and see what he was all about. And the last thing he said was, "Go out to the whole world, make disciples, and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit." The Great Commission, and he founded the church on purpose in order to evangelize. That's why the church exists. Paul VI said it very clearly: the church exists to evangelize. The church has at times been either distracted or inefficient or ineffective at evangelization. When I was a kid and I thought of what an evangelist, I didn't think of John Paul II. I thought of Billy Graham, because he went out and he preached, he filled stadiums, he did the altar call. And in my mind, that's what evangelization was. But John Paul knew that the church needed, in light of Vatican II, because Vatican II was all about calling for this evangelization. And John Paul put this huge spotlight on evangelizing people, of re-evangelizing the baptized, right? And that's what World Youth Day was all about. That's what his world travel was all about. It wasn't just, hey, look at me, I'm the Pope. It was like, no, we need to refocus on the sacraments. We need to refocus on the person of Jesus Christ, because he is the way, the truth, and the life. And we've forgotten about that. We need to get back to basics, and we need to tell people the good news, even though they've heard it already. And that's why it's the new evangelization, new in methods, new in ardor, and new in expression. And that's what the Catechism of the Catholic Church is all about. I mean, most of the top 100 things he accomplished all pointed to the new evangelization.
Wow. Yeah, and what a message we need to hear today. With the world and the mess it is in, and the church with all the struggles that are going on in the hierarchy and everywhere else, let's get back to basics. The Great Commission, like you said, and follow him.
And ultimately, the only answer to what the world is going through now, to all these struggles, is Jesus Christ, the person of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And if we take our eyes off of the world and refocus them on Jesus, it all goes away.
Amen.
Everything becomes simple. And I've said this a number of times, maybe not to you guys, but that if each Catholic man in the United States, a few hundred thousand of us, I guess, maybe a couple million, would live our vocation and live holy lives, it would have a ripple effect that would fundamentally transform the world.
Amen.
Catholic men in the United States, get down on your knees, go to confession, receive the sacraments, love your wife, love your children, learn the faith, live the faith. You will change the world forever. That's all it takes. That's all it takes.
That's it.
It's that easy. It's that easy and it's that hard.
Yeah.
Because, and ultimately it comes down to the one virtue that's necessary to enter heaven, and that's humility. And I think too many of us have too much pride, and unfortunately social media kind of amplifies that. I'm a rock star, I've got so many followers, I've got so many likes, and it's addicting. I know it because I'm on social media. It's addicting. But we need to have great humility. We need to focus on Jesus. We need to get back to the sacraments. We need to love our wives. We need to love our children. And like I said, if just the Catholic men in this country would do that, we win. And the world changes. We have a Christian culture that the Western civilization built, which is now crumbling very quickly.
Yeah. And along with that, and that's so true, there it is, John Paul II had an amazing prayer life, and we as men need to step it up with that. And so can you describe his prayer life and his devotional life, and what kept him going in the midst of all the struggles for early childhood, and like throughout, like you said, through all the wars and everything, and then even through his pontificate?
Yeah, he's a great example of what we need to do as men. Take a step back into his childhood. Before he was born, his mother had a daughter, a sister, John Paul's sister. She died very young. He was born when he was a young boy, I think 7, 8 years old, 9. His brother died. His brother was a doctor, 15 years older than him. And it was a pandemic similar to what we have now. I think it was scarlet fever. He died of scarlet fever. John Paul, Karol Wojtyła, really admired his brother. I mean, this was his hero. And he died. And his mother died when he was 9. So, and he was left with his father. His father raised him. He would often find his father on his knees in prayer at the side of his bed in the middle of the night. He'd get up to go to the bathroom, and there's Dad with the light on, kneeling in prayer. And I mean, that has a profound effect. And I'm a father. I've got 5 children, and that's what I want my children to see me doing. I mean, look how it affected John Paul II, how it formed him to change the world because he saw his father in prayer. Now, there's also a movement to beatify, canonize John Paul's parents, which is really extraordinary. Saint Karol Wojtyła, right? That would be extraordinary, and Saint John Paul the Great, which I think it's coming. I think it's coming. So he was formed by his father. His father died when he was in his early 20s. They had just moved to Krakow, and he was studying to be a priest in the underground seminary. And he came home, and his father was dead, orphaned at the age, I think, 22 years old, left all alone. And that has a profound effect on your psyche. But his father had told him that he must put his hand in the hand of Our Lady, and she is the surest, quickest path to Jesus. And he had a great devotion to Our Lady of Czestochowa, the Black Madonna, the Shrine of Jasna Góra in Poland. He went there quite frequently, and that's where he got Totus Tuus from. He said this early in his pontificate. He said, how many times have I come back to this place and whispered all of my pain to you and said, Totus Tuus, I'm all yours, Mary. And that's how he became such a great saint and a great man of prayer. People would often find him lying prostrate in front of the tabernacle, and he would be, I mean, he was a mystic. I mean, people that knew him, he would be there physically, but he was gone. He was transported to another realm, and they were just blown away by this. Here's another inside story that I heard from a number of people, that when he traveled around the world, they told the people who were his handlers in whichever country, do not walk him past the tabernacle. You will lose him. He will be gone for an hour and a half. It will kill your schedule. So they were very careful because they knew that it was like a magnet being pulled toward the tabernacle, right? And what a great gift. I mean, I drive by a church, and sometimes I don't even recognize that it's a church until my wife does this, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, church, right? So we also, as men, need that pull. We need to recognize the pull of the Blessed Sacrament of the Tabernacle, and knowing that our prayers there are amplified in a way because he's really there, truly present. And I had one of my early mentors, when I came back to the church, said to me, I'd like you to meet my best friend. Let's just go for a drive. I want you to meet my best friend. And he drove me to a church, and I thought, yeah, his friend is probably in the church somewhere. He just took me to the tabernacle. Like, okay, I get it.
That's awesome.
That's evangelization. I mean, you don't have to necessarily evangelize with words. I mean, words are necessary, yes, but you know, we can do things that will make people go, huh, okay. And you know, we need to live the faith in a profound and deep way, but also to be very creative, because that will make a difference in the lives of others.
Amen.
Awesome.
Wow, that was great. I just kind of got lost in the story.
Stories are great. Awesome. That's what Jesus did, so that's great.
Yeah. So
I got a million of them.
I bet you do. So to extend on that a little bit, what was the relationship between John Paul II and Mother Teresa? I mean, I kind of picture them like brother and sister.
No question. No question. Interesting story. They met in the United States of America.
Of all places.
Yeah, in Philadelphia, they met at a Eucharistic Congress in 1976, 2 years before he became Pope, and about 5 years before Mother Teresa hit the world stage. Um, Eucharistic Congress, and interesting that that same Congress, Cardinal Wojtyła gave this speech where he said the end. Essentially, he said the end times are upon us. That the Antichrist is building toward the end times. That's also in my book. But yeah, he met Mother Teresa in '76. They hit it off. They had a profound friendship. Interestingly, she is the only woman to ever ride in the Pope Mobile, I think, to this day.
Huh.
She was not invited. She was tenacious, man. I mean, this woman is 90 pounds, 5 foot even on a good day.
Yeah.
And her tenacity, I've heard stories from people that met her. She's just a whirlwind. So, great things come in small packages. Anyway, so in Calcutta, John Paul's going on, and she just got in. And he's like, well, what am I going to say? It's Mother Teresa, right?
Right.
And she hijacked part of his. I mean, he was supposed to go to her place for the dying in Calcutta, and she basically she took him and led him, which is amazing. You think of John Paul and his personality and what a force of nature he was, but I mean, you put these two together, and wow. I look at it this way. I'm so blessed to have lived in the time of Mother Teresa and John Paul II, two extraordinary saints. And they were like brother and sister. I mean, they were of one mind. He opened a room, I guess you could say, or a set of rooms in the Vatican for the homeless, run by Mother Teresa's sisters. He was a great fan, and she was a great fan. And they're enjoying the reward together right now.
Amen. Yeah, it is a blessing to be able to be alive during their time. I mean, and some of the greatest saints that the church will look back on and like, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, definitely.
It's an amazing time to be alive.
It is. It is.
Absolutely.
What's the impact John Paul II has had on marriages and families? I mean, I guess we'll never know fully, but wow, what a major difference he's had, probably on all of our marriages and families.
Yeah, no question. Interesting you say that, because I think it was the beatification homily. No, it was canonization homily. Well, one of them. Pope Francis called John Paul II the Pope of the family, or the saint of the family.
Okay.
Because he recognized that the domestic church, I think he may have even coined that phrase, or at least he popularized it. The domestic church. This is where we nurture future saints. He was nurtured by his parents. He had great devotion to his mother. She died when he was young. His father nurtured his sanctity, led him in prayer, taught him how to pray. And so he recognized that this is where saints are made, in the home, and that the necessity of the complementarity and the teamwork of mother and father in that regard is extraordinary. He wrote so many. He wrote an encyclical, Familias Consortio, and a number of apostolic letters to parents, to families. He even wrote a letter to children, which is really incredible. And I think that's also in my book, his letter to children, just telling them that family is a microcosm of heaven, of the Holy Trinity, and it's a microcosm it's the building block of society. And the place, the saint factory, it comes from the family.
Now, speaking of saint factory, no, I'm just kidding. What role did Mary play in John Paul's life?
Totus Tuus.
Devotion to him, to her.
Oh, yeah.
How did that affect him? I mean, looking at the statue here, he has her all over his garments.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, profoundly, and there are some falsehoods that came out of that people perpetuated about his mother's death. That his father told him that Mary was his new mother, that she needed to be everything for him. He did, but it wasn't that profound. It was just a natural gravitation for John Paul. His father would take him to Jasna Gora, the shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa, and his father had a great devotion to Mary, and I think just when you grow up as a young man with no mother, that you need a maternal influence, and he didn't have that physically, but he had that in Our Lady. And you could just see in his life that he was a very well balanced person, psychologically, emotionally, very stable, and that's rare for somebody that grows up in a single parent family. So but he did have community around him. Anyway, with Our Lady, she just had a fit. I mean, he had this devotion to her that was just it poured out from his heart. One thing that most people don't know is that totus tuus and his shield, his coat of arms, was from the time he was made bishop. He brought that into the papacy. He didn't come up with totus tuus when he was made pope. It was back to 1962 when he was first ordained an auxiliary bishop of Krakow. So that was a very big part of his life from the early part to the end. Now, he gave us the 5 new mysteries of the Rosary, the luminous mysteries. And of course, it's a Christ-centered prayer. We need to remind people the Rosary is a Marian prayer, but it focuses on the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. It's a Jesus-centered prayer where basically what he said is, we're sitting at Mary's feet learning about Jesus. That's what we're doing here in praying the Rosary. And so he gave us that. He declared a Marian year, I think once, maybe twice during his pontificate. He wrote an encyclical. He wrote his apostolic letter about the Rosary, declared a year of the Rosary. So yeah, great devotion to Our Lady. Knowing that, and he drew that from St. Louis de Montfort. Knowing that Mary is the quickest, surest way to Jesus. So Louis de Montfort, the evolution of that was John Paul II and his life and his devotion to Our Lady.
So did John Paul II pray the Rosary multiple times a day? You hear about saints, I mean, they just constantly are praying the Rosary. I mean, is he one of those saints that did it multiple times, or at least daily,
question.
obviously?
No question. He probably prayed in his sleep. Yeah. So a lot of, and I learned this, a lot of polls, when they talk about praying the Rosary, it's just not 5 decades. It's all of the mysteries.
The whole Big Daddy.
The whole thing. And then he added 5 more mysteries. So that's, if you're pushing through, that's an hour.
Yeah.
So yeah, great devotion. And I don't know how often, I know he prayed the Rosary every day. I'm not sure they prayed all 20 mysteries every day, but yeah, always had a rosary in his hand. He put 3 rosaries in my hand, so those are my relics. I also have 2 books that he signed for me, so those are also great relics.
Awesome.
And so my boss, the one who said, "Hey, would you like to meet the Pope?" When I got married, he had an artist create a marriage blessing, a nuptial blessing with our names and the date. He had John Paul hand sign it for us.
Wow,
how cool!
So yeah, hand drawn and signed by a saint. So that's yep, absolutely. So yeah, he's had a profound effect on my life, on my marriage. And continues to do so. I mean, I feel the graces of that those meetings with him, and on the relics that I have, second class, of course. Just a great gift.
And
amazing.
You talk about in the book the relationship with Pope Benedict XVI and John Paul II. So I mean,
yeah.
Benedict XVI was a Congregation of Doctrine and Faith for how many years? I mean, they obviously knew each other pretty well, and they both suffered so much too. Yeah. Gone through that as early years.
Interestingly, they didn't meet until 1978, the first conclave of 78, after Paul VI died, when they elected John Paul I. They met there. They hit it off. Benedict was, Cardinal Ratzinger at the time. He had only been a cardinal for a year. I mean, he was a baby cardinal. And Wojtyła, I think he was made a cardinal in the 60s. I think it was, I don't have the dates in front of me. But when he was elected, John Paul II later in 1978, one of the first things he did is he reached out to Benedict, who had a great reputation as a preeminent theologian. And he said, I would like you to be the head of CDF. And Benedict was like, we had a new cardinal here. They kind of need me over here in Bavaria, in Munich. And so he put him off for a little while, but he kept asking. And I think it was 82, Benedict finally said, Ratzinger said yes. So it was 4 years into the 26-year pontificate when he brought Cardinal Ratzinger over to Rome and replaced him in Munich. Great friendship. They met every week, every Friday. They would meet and talk, and they were, I call them the dynamic duo, because John Paul is a philosopher, Benedict theologian. I mean, two, left brain, right brain, right? I mean, honestly, and by the way, I'm working on a sequel, 100 Ways Pope Benedict Changed the World.
Oh, cool.
And it's extraordinary. But John Paul II's pontificate would not have been what it was without Ratzinger. Impossible. He wouldn't have accomplished nearly what he did without having Ratzinger with him. And I think he recognized that, and that shows humility, right? He's like, I'm not as great a theologian as this man. I need him to complete me, in a sense, and to have this powerhouse at the Vatican, and they did. So fitting that Benedict Ratzinger would become the next pope to, in a sense, complete much of what John Paul left undone, and so beautifully too. Think of the homily that he gave. I could see him waving from the house of the Father, and all of the things that Benedict said, and that kind of really tied up a lot of loose ends at the Vatican before his resignation.
It seems like Pope Benedict, we don't know. I mean, he's still alive, obviously, but I think he'll be a saint and a doctor of the church. But that's going a little bit further than even John Paul II.
Tony's prediction.
Yeah. What do you think?
No question. No question. One of the greatest theological minds, one of the greatest minds of our lifetime. And so mischaracterized by the press. I mean, God's Rottweiler, really?
Yeah.
The most gentle, humble. I mean, I have a friend who met with him while he was still cardinal, and she dropped some of her books. They're at his desk, right? And she spilled her books on the floor. He jumped out of his chair, got down on his knees, and he helped her pick these books out. I mean, it's the Prince of the Church, right? But what humility. I mean, that was just who he was. He was very simple, very unassuming. He asked John Paul several times, please, Holy Father, let me go back to my studies and to teaching, and I want to go back to Germany and do what I was doing before. And John Paul would say, just a little longer.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So you highlight, we've highlighted today a lot of JP2's strengths. What were some of his weaknesses?
I mean, he was a man. He did sin.
Yeah, no question. Well, I think we've covered a lot of that. He was not the greatest theologian. He got Ratzinger to compliment him. He was deceived by malicious men. He also was not very good at administration. The Vatican finances, the day-to-day running of the Vatican as a city state, not really done well. And that was his job. And he focused on the new evangelization. He was gone a lot. So it's like, you're the dad. If you're gone from the house 100 days of the year, traveling the world, who's minding the store, right?
Yeah, the bills tend to pile up on the desk. The business's decisions are kind of left to somebody else.
Yeah. And if you don't put it and there are a lot of things that Jesus said too. You have a steward in charge of your affairs while you're gone. And I think that one of the things he should have done, and it's all hindsight, right? I mean, is to put somebody very effective, like-minded in charge of the Vatican city-state. Now, I'm not that deep into Vaticanology to know who those men were during his pontificate, but they certainly were not like-minded to John Paul enough to be efficient administrators of the city-state. Last thing that at least that comes to mind immediately is that his appointment of bishops were hit and miss. He appointed some rock stars. You think of Cardinal Francis in Chicago, amazing man, very, very holy man, extraordinary. But he also approved McCarrick as a cardinal, and a number of others we could point to here in the United States. Some were rock stars, some were evildoers. To be kind, but again, he trusted the people that he put in charge of vetting these guys. He took them at their word. Many of them, even his own staff, were not like-minded with John Paul II. They could care less about evangelization and holiness. It was the agenda. And a lot of that garbage, for lack of a better word, came out of the misreading of the Second Vatican Council, of the incredibly poor formation that we had in the 60s, 70s, and particularly those decades, but even going back further. You know, if you don't have a solid formation and you're just a climber, and you get to the Vatican, you're in charge of a dicastery and department, and you could care less about evangelization and holiness and all the stuff the Pope's talking about. You just want the glorified office, right, and the power. And we see that today in the church, in government, that I'm living for the power, man. I get to say who lives and who dies and who gets taxed and who doesn't. Is really cool because I'm important. You know, pure lack of humility, pure pride. And I think there was a lot of that in the Vatican during John Paul's administration. And, you know, we need somebody in there to clean it up. We really do. Because there was a story earlier this month about this $1.8 billion that got transferred to Australia from the Vatican Bank. Like, what?
Yeah, right.
That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's being a deceiver there. Somebody is robbing Peter to pay Australia, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not right. And we need people who are good, faithful Christian Catholic administrators running our church, and we don't have it.
Yeah.
And hate to say it, guys, but there's going to be hell to pay.
Yeah.
Literally.
Right.
Yeah, literally.
And it shows like even a saint, a pope, can't do it all, right? And if you're going to focus on one thing, evangelization has got to be your baby. You know, I was talking to a priest and he's like, yeah, the administrative side, I even went to his office. I'm like, wow, what a mess in here. But he's like, I'd rather spend my time being with the people and on the streets with the people, because you can't do it all. But you're right. You got to pick your right people to do those jobs and be in that place. So, you know, Jesus had Judas a part of the group too. So it's one of those things, there's always going to be evil, but we obviously try to stop it as much as we can.
Teach the faith, make the sacraments available. But the way the church is structured, for better or for worse, they're also administrators, they're bosses, they're running parishes. I honestly think, priests, love you, but you need to put good lay people in charge of those jobs.
Yeah.
And focus on teaching the faith and administering the sacraments. And if we do that, I mean, the faithful, the lay faithful need to partner with our bishops and priests, and they need to do that type of work, and let the priests and bishops be free to do their work, which only they can do.
Right. And especially in this time with such a lack of catechesis and people not knowing Christ, like we started this interview, you know, this is the time that we need our priests on the front lines helping souls and not behind a desk answering, you know, whatever they can do and lay people can do for them. I like that idea.
Yeah.
No, that's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Well, Patrick, thank you for joining us today. Where can our viewers find more about you?
Yeah, they can find my book at booksbypatrick.com. My blog is thepraetorium.com. That's a little tough to spell, but look it up. The Praetorium, the intersection of faith and culture, faith, culture, and politics, I should say. And my business is Nova Media, which is my marketing communications company. And you can find that at novamedia.us, or easy URL is catholicpublicist.com.
Awesome.
I'll put those in the links and people
Absolutely.
can find them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, again, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
We look forward to seeing more of what you do, and hopefully you can join us again sometime.
I'd enjoy that, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Patrick.
Great.
God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you. And just to let y'all know, be sure and help support us by subscribing and clicking that notification bell. That way that'll let you know whenever we have new content coming out. And in the meantime, remember, be real.
Be bold. Be Catholic. God bless.
God bless.